All right, looks like we are live. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Alex Martinez from Creating Coding Careers, where we help aspiring developers transition into technology roles. We recently had a few guest speakers come in, and we were talking about freelancing as one of the possible solutions to help solve the experience paradox. So that refers to the difficulty of obtaining experience without first having experience. Today's guest is an experienced freelancer. She's also a Creating Coding Careers alumnus. I'd like to give a big welcome to Lexius Waltar. Welcome, Lexius.
Hi, thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
So before we go deep dive into freelancing, I just wanted to get a quick origin story from you as far as how did you get into tech? If you can just rewind back to that point in time and give us a little, yeah, if you could share that with us, please.
Yeah, definitely. So I took a non-traditional route into tech. I actually graduated UC San Diego with an environmental science degree. So I was a huge biologist. I was actually teaching biology before I started teaching coding at Elementary Institute of Science, actually in San Diego. So if y'all know where that is, it's a great program. I was working with all kinds of students, teaching them front-end dev with JavaScript, which is really fun. I ended up deciding to go to San Diego Code School, which was Mike's boot camp before Creating Coding Careers, the apprenticeship. So I did that for a while, and I've been in tech about 3 years now. So I'm feeling pretty good.
Nice. So I was looking at your LinkedIn profile, and I noticed it looked like uh, you started working in tech. I think when you started working with Elementary Institute of Science. Can you tell us a little bit about what you did there?
Oh yeah, so Elementary Institute of Science is a nonprofit org in San Diego, and they basically bring experimental science and cool science topics to students in Southeast San Diego. So I was one of the coding instructors. We would run a coding class for students from second grade all the way to fifth and sixth grade, sometimes 12th graders as well. And we would teach them how to create websites, how to write small programs, which is really fun. One of the things I can remember is teaching the students about programmatic thinking. And I'm sure y'all have heard of the how do you make a peanut butter sandwich exercise, where you want them to teach you how to create a peanut butter sandwich. And it's hilarious. You're trying to teach them, if you don't tell, the computer the exact things that you want, you're going to get some wonky bugs, you're going to get things going awry. So just really working with kids, getting them interested in coding at an early age and keeping them, interested throughout high school. It was awesome. And for me, it was a great intro because I realized like, oh, I really like tech. And it really has so many possibilities, not only teaching students new skills, but also it's a fun industry to be in, and you're really creating novel things that haven't existed before. So yeah.
Yeah, I took a look at it. It looks like a great program. And then you just told us that you went to San Diego Code School. You got some experience under your belt. And then
Mhm.
when did you start entering the world of freelancing? How did that all start?
Right. So I graduated from the boot camp. There was a little bit of time between, when you graduate and when you have your first job. And I think that was a perfect time for me to freelance. A lot of my experience was working with, small companies in San Diego. Some of it was mostly web development. And so that really looks like maybe some small React, landing pages or some what WordPress sites. Nothing too crazy, but I think it was just a really good introduction to what I would be working on once I got to the industry, and also just giving me an experience working with folk, talking non-technical to technical people, which is great. And just kind of putting my foot out there, seeing what is out there, what kinds of projects are available, and kind of where I can fit in and things that I would like to do.
So what kind of platforms did you start touching on first? I know like there's Fiverr, there's Upwork, people would use Craigslist sometimes. Did you use all of the
Yeah.
above, or were those yeah, which ones did you start off with?
Yeah. So I use good old fashioned networking. I was going to tech meetups. I would go to different business meetups in San Diego, and I would talk to folks. And quite a few people needed some websites, some simple landing pages. So I connected that way. In addition, I use social media just to connect with folks, or finding out, oh, we need this, we need that. So I think I took the non-traditional route, and I just kind of went rogue and started talking to people, and that seemed to work for me.
Nice. So, um, a lot of people, I guess, they have this complex, right, where they don't feel they're ready. When did you feel like, yeah, I'm ready to go out there and start, pushing myself as a freelance coder? When did you feel comfortable to do that? Was it kind of like, I have to do it. I got to put some money on the table, so I got to go try. Or when did you actually gain the courage to say, like, I think I'm ready now. I'm going to go try. Like, what was that? What was that process like?
Oh yeah, that is a true process that you have to work through with yourself. For me, it was kind of like, we got to do it. You know, I'm one of those people that when I was a kid, they threw me in the pool, they threw me in the deep end, and you got to swim and figure it out. I did that, and I took a chance on myself, and the folks that I worked with first were, family, friends, and things like that. So it was a very encouraging space, so I could really just dive in there. They're super communicative with me, and you'll find that a lot of folks are. But it really is. I don't think you're ever ready. You just have to do it, especially when it's your first role. You got to jump in and you got to take it. Whether it is freelancing or having your first job, it's that kind of, I know what I know, and you just have to roll with that, and you're going to learn so much more along the way.
So, would you remember what was the first client you got? What was that project all about?
Mhm. Oh man, so the first project I got, it was a personal branding site. It was 2 pages in WordPress. At this point, I hadn't worked in WordPress at all, and I was using, I don't know if anyone's worked in WordPress, but they have an old Gutenberg editor. It was kind of a pain, and it didn't look that great, but I was able, like, the client was great. She had known my family for a long time, and so I just helped her out. A lot of it was going back and forth. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? Um, and it was just really iterative, I would say, is the process. It wasn't so much as like a handoff, like, okay, this is done and we don't ever talk about it again. It was more so, this is the amount of time we have allotted. So let's say it's 2 months. I think I had about 2 months to get it done. And I did a couple of iterations within those 2 months until she found something that she liked and I liked it. It was very simple. I would say that most of the work you'll find out there is like, there's a lot of different kinds. And if you want to go towards the marketing side, as far as like creating landing pages and stuff, you'll be set.
So what's the process like when you first meet with a client? I'm assuming you got to get some assets from them. You have to start discussing, well, what exactly
Right.
is thing going to look like? Um, I'm
Right.
sure when you started out, you're kind of just, shooting from the hip, kind of just figuring it as you went along. But eventually, of
Mhm.
course, it was more like a business where you had this down pat, like this is exactly what I'm going to ask for. This is step 2. This is step 3. Like, how did you compartmentalize how you deal with clients from the beginning all the way through the end?
Right. Great question. So when you're working with a client, there are, depending on the task. So let's create an example here. Let's say that you're working with a client and they want you to create a landing page for their business. Well, there's going to be some basic information you're going to need. What do you want to show on that page? And a lot of the times you'll find sometimes a client doesn't necessarily know. So the first part of, and I call this the consultation, is just you sitting with the client, finding out, okay, what is it that you'd like? What's the purpose of this web page or this website? What's the main information that your user needs to take away from it? What images do you want? What colors do you want? Because they have their own brand identity that they want to make sure goes along. So first thing you want to do is have a consultation. That's like the most important, just so you can get a better idea of what the project is and what's going on and what the client wants, but also so you can give the client kind of expectations of what they need to provide to you before you can do any work. This is the key. Before you can do any work, you need quite a few things just so you have an idea, right? I use a ton of tools because, scope creep is a real thing. And scope creep basically means, let's say that I'm told to make a landing page and I have 5 hours to make it. This is just an example. If the original scope, like schema that we agreed on is completed, but then I bring it back for review and you want something new, then we have to reevaluate, right? So the
Yeah.
scope creep means the scope of the project is increasing without like being revisited and reviewed, right? So something you want to make sure you keep track of the tasks that you have for the project. So if I'm making this landing page, I want to make sure that I have a header built, I got a footer built, I have all the images I need, maybe I have a image slider that's going in the middle of the site, and I want to make sure I have all the links in my navigation bar, those things, right? Maybe those are your 5 tasks. You want to make sure those are clearly written down so that you know what it is. The client also has an expectation on, okay, these are the tasks that are to get done, and this is how long the tasks are going to take. I'm sure that quite a few students have had experience, or quite a few apprentices have had experience with the agile principles. You get a ticket, you get a user story, and you normally throw on the complexity or the time that it'll take to complete that ticket. It's super similar to that. You just want to make sure that you have a pretty good idea. So if normally I go consultation, I do a rough mock-up of, okay, what are the steps? How many tickets is this going to take? How many tickets is going to really sum up all the work I'm going to have to do? And based on the tickets, how long is that going to take? Once that's done, normally you have either weekly or bi-weekly communication with the client. And that's just to make sure that they know what's going on. If there are any changes to the complexities or to the scope, if they want something different, you're able to talk with them and you're doing it on a timely manner so that they know what's going on. You know what's going on. Everyone's in the loop. That's really important, making sure you communicate. And then the last thing is that you want to make sure that the expectations are clear once you deliver the final output. So let's say that I'm working on this landing page. I made it clear to the client, like, hey, okay, so I created it for you. Let's say I did it in WordPress. Sometimes I will include actually a walkthrough. So I'll schedule a session post so they know how to use the WordPress site. And if they want to make changes on their own, they can go in there. If not, I'll include, management fee, and I'll be the main person managing the site in the future. And we can negotiate how that looks. So you just want to have clear expectations between you and the client of, once it's done, is it I'm going to wipe my hands clear and we go our separate ways? Or are we going to treat this like I will manage it for you going forward? Because they're pretty different as far as workload goes. So you just want to keep that in mind. But yeah.
So it sounds like you kind of describe it almost like a contract at first, right? Saying this is what you're going to get, and then anything above and beyond that is completely separate from our initial contract, right? So one thing I'm sure some of the listeners, and by the way, if you have any questions, please feel free to just drop it in the chat. Any questions for Lexius? One of my questions is, so I'm sure this is a skill and it takes time to master. How do you estimate how long it's going to take you to work or do this project? And then how do you decide how much you're going to charge them per hour or per ticket, like you mentioned?
Right. Yeah. So first things first, your first project, you're probably not going to be charging that much. Let's say that if you have some experience in it, of course, you can charge a little bit more. But your first project, I would probably charge, depending on the project, you have a set rate. Let's say hourly, your first role is 20 an hour, right? I think that's pretty good for someone starting off. You can decide, let me think. So basically the way that I do it is based on what I've already worked on in the past, I kind of have an idea. So in my experience, I've been doing this for a while now. So a 2-page landing, a 2-page website normally takes about 10 hours, probably less, give or take how long it takes to get information from the client, right? Now you can do $20 an hour for 10 hours. I mean, you'll get a little bit. It normally comes down to just what your experience is. For someone else, it could take them 20 hours to make the same 2-page website. And then they have to take that into account when they're bidding for new projects. So let's say that it takes me 20 hours to do a website. I'm probably not going to do 5 websites maybe in a week, or maybe you can't. So a lot of what I will say is to time it is just experience. You're going to probably have to take the first couple and maybe do it at a bargain just to get the experience in. But once you have a pretty good grasp, and you can do it pretty snappy, then you're able to charge to be a little snappier and be a little faster, and you have more experience, so you can really communicate like what you're worth.
And so I can imagine, because you said you started off networking. So I'm assuming you had maybe several offers come at different times. So you started creating this pipeline. How do you manage that pipeline of incoming clients?
Right. Yeah. So I'm going to speak to that pipeline too. At one given time, if you're having 4 or 5 people requesting your services, you're only one person and you only have so many hours in a day. And you also, at a 9 to 5, you have 40 hours a week. That's your allotted time. In some ways, you want to make sure you're honoring yourself and giving yourself, some time to rest, sometimes to eat. So you want to keep what your ideal, schedule, you want to keep that in mind while you're working. And for me, it was really like, I don't want to be working too much. I still want to spend time with my family. So it was really important to keep track of all the different projects I have, everything I'm working on. And at first, I was using Notion. Notion has some awesome tools. I was able to create a to-do list, and it looks super similar to Jira. So you can create a ticket essentially and walk it through all the statuses until it's complete. It's super easy because you can share that with other folks. So if I'm working with a client, they can see what I'm working on in real time, and they can see it, going how I'm progressing over time, which is really nice. Once I had a few more projects, so let's say about 3 at a time, I started using a tool called Hectic. It's an app made by freelancers for freelancers. It's really cool because developers made it. So I would say that it was super helpful. You can actually use it to generate invoices. I used it to generate contracts between the clients. So I could specify timelines, deadlines. I could specify rates, things like that. And something else I was even like amazing, going back to the idea of managing your time and really counting your time. When you're working per hour and you're billing a client per hour, you want to make sure you're very accurate with the time that you're accounting for. Even if you're working until 3 in the morning, like you want to make sure that's being tracked. So in Hectic, there's actually a timer that you can set. It can be on a project by project basis. You can actually set it when you start working, stop it once you're done, and it'll generate a graph of like your work over time. And then you can send those to your client. And so they have also another track of what your hours are looking like. So Hectic was super awesome. And that one was like $11 per month the last time I looked at it. So there's a ton of tools out there. If you use the free tools like Notion and things, it will take you just being diligent and making sure you're updating it and being clear on it. If you use Hectic and some more of the advanced tools, you can get away with using it when you want and setting up a lot of automation to kind of do the job for you, which is really nice. But those really are a game changer. I feel like a lot of folks talk about, oh, just get into freelancing, but they never talk about how do you manage the projects once you have them. Like it can be a lot, it's really tough sometimes to switch between different projects. A lot of the times you'll be working with one tech stack and then you get another project and you're on a whole different thing. So it's really important. I think for me, it was important for my peace of mind, for my sanity, just to be able to like schedule everything and have it somewhere where I could see it at a glance. And doing it on a project by project basis makes it easy for you to create trends. And so another thing we talked about was like, how do you know what to charge? How do you know how much time you spent on a past project? Well, documenting that, you can say, okay, on the last project, I worked 10 hours and I charged $2,000 for that. And this is what it came with. Well, the next person you meet that has a project similar, well, you have an idea or an expectation of the type of work that it is, the amount of work it is, and kind of how much you can charge for that. And having a record, not only for yourself, but something you can show other folks, I think is really helpful. And it helped me over time as well.
So I can imagine, as you're networking, the majority of the people that you're dealing with probably already have a website, and maybe they're asking you to revamp it. But you also run
Mhm.
across people who are saying, you know what, I don't have anything. I don't have a website at all, and I would like to start from scratch. There's
Mhm.
obvious differences. I'm assuming like there's already assets available for someone who's revamping the website. What other differences are there, and which client would you prefer? Would you prefer going after the person who already has something and would like to, make it look better, or someone who's like flat out has nothing and wants you to start from scratch?
Ooh, that's a great question. I personally prefer someone who's asking to revamp the website. Mostly because yes, they already have um, part of creating a website is how do you want to display your business to the community? And someone who already has a website has a pretty clear idea. They've already done it once, so they know what they don't want and they know what they want or what they're looking to do. Versus when you're working with someone who probably doesn't have a website and this is their first time, there's just a little bit of extra work that comes with introducing them to like, hey, here's a couple websites. What do you think about that? And there's a little bit more back and forth because you want to have a pretty clear idea of what they want before you start. But imagine someone's already been through that process with one developer. They got this far. And so now they're like, I have an idea of what I don't like, and I have an idea of what I do. And so normally it's a little bit easier. They also have been through the process before. So they kind of know what to expect. They know, okay, you'll need this type of image and it needs to be an SVG or it needs to be a PNG. And normally they have a pretty good idea of that. So I don't mind doing a couple revamps. That's easy work. I could do that.
So, do you think someone getting into freelance should think of themselves as, I got to be ready to become like a one person army? In other words, if they really don't have an optimized logo, I'm probably going to have to figure out how to create logos. If they don't know anything about search engine optimization, I'm going to have to learn about search engine optimization. Or do you build a team out and be like, hey, you know what? If they need search engine optimization, I'm going to go to this person. Or if they need a revamp logo, I'd probably go to this person. Is it better to kind of build your team before you start getting into freelancing? Or should you go out there and start learning everything as you go along?
Oh yeah, no, I would say you should build your team as you go along because first you got to figure out sometimes you don't need to do that. So you could have a team which would be great and that would be kind of like having an agency, right? You're like we got all these folks in one house, they have all these skills, but I started and I didn't know any of that. Um I think if you just get started and you figure out what you need over time, two things are going to happen. Either you're going to meet someone who has those skills and now you have a new connection, now you have a new friend, and you can also piggyback on each other to get more work. Or the second thing that'll happen is you realize there's a gap in the knowledge for yourself and you realize, okay, if I have this other skill, then I'm even more marketable and I have more skills and I can find new opportunities for freelancing. And so maybe instead of getting someone else, you're like, hey, SEO is similar enough and it's important enough in web development that I'll just go get a certificate and then now I know how to do all the things I need in one house. Um, but to that point, sometimes it's easier just to find someone who knows how to do it. It will take less time to find someone who knows how to do it sometimes than trying to figure it out yourself. I've been in one of those situations, so.
So I think a few weeks ago, I had the same discussion. We
Mhm.
were talking about freelancing with Memo and Mike, and Mike brought up a great point. I guess once you take on a client, let's say they belong to a certain industry, and just for example's sake, let's say that it's a law firm. Once you've built out, a website for, let's say, a law firm or a dentist or whatever, do you now say, okay, I kind of know what a dentist website should look like? Do you start knocking on doors to other dentists and say, well, I kind of have an idea of what I can do. Now I'm just going to go out there and start, like a cookie cutter and just boom, I'm going to start knocking out a bunch of dentists. Is that a strategy that you took? I'm curious when you went into freelancing, started getting more people in your pipeline.
Yeah, no, that is a great strategy, and I did do that. So I started working with nonprofits and then I started working with small businesses that were just in the community. It wasn't as narrowed down to dentists, but that's a really good idea to go and find a bunch of folks. Because I mean, they're saying 9 times out of 10 the same thing. You have like the same sites. Maybe the colors and the images change, but they're pretty much the same. Like that's a great idea. I kind of took it as it went along. Who I talked to kind of became what I went, but I think that's a great approach. And especially because in those very niche communities, they all talk. So if you do a really great job, you don't even have to go knock on doors. Someone will offer you as a recommendation. And like, I feel like recommendations are invaluable.
Absolutely. Um,
Mhm.
I want you to. Well, we were kind of talking about this before we went live. Would you say freelancing is a way to make a living, a way to gain experience, and how do you make it both?
Yeah, yeah. Oh man, so we talked about how freelancing is definitely a way to get experience because you can work on all kinds of stuff, which is great because the goal is if you get enough experience, you know what you like, you know kind of which direction you want to take. Maybe you start in front end and then you take you work on a team with back end and you're like, actually, I don't like this anymore. And you just want to try something new. Like freelance is awesome for that. I would say the difference between freelancing to learn and to maybe take on a little extra cash versus making it your full-time role is really having like some structure and making sure that you're using different tools to really systemize it and automate it. That's the main difference, I feel. You really can't have anything too sustainable if you're always taking too much on, or if you're killing yourself to do all these freelance projects, or if you're not taking on enough to sustain your quality of life. So you want to find a system that works for you. I think that's one way that it can really become um, a business. And we're talking about doing freelancing full time. Well, at that point, you're a business. You're operating as a business, um, which you should be doing legally and make sure you file your taxes correctly. But that's a whole nother discussion. But yeah, it's a business, and uh, the thing is, once you become a freelancer and you treat it as a business, you are the hot commodity. It's you really feeling confident. And something we talked about earlier in this call was, when did you feel ready? When did you feel confident to do that? Well, once you treat it as like, this is my business, you really have to feel confident enough to say, this is what I do well. This is what I can work with another team to do. These are what my connections allow me to do. Um, and you'll be great. But it really just takes knowing your tools, knowing how to automate it, and really like learning some of the soft skills to communicate with clients, which sometimes as a developer we don't always have. But that's what's really going to make you different if you want to make freelancing full time.
So I'm sure there's going to be bumps in the road. I'm just curious, do you have any like disaster stories that you might be able to share with us, like to give us, things to avoid? Would you like to share any of those?
Ooh, things to avoid. Always, always,
Maybe
always
chasing people down
never
for money.
deploy things
That's one
on
of them.
Fridays.
Yep.
Like, don't ever do it. um, yeah, I would say most of my disaster stories have come from poor time management, um, and miscommunications. And that's really when I started working on uh, trying to find these tools to help me out, because it really came down to, oh man, I had deployed something right before I was leaving to the middle of the desert with zero cell service and no
Oh, man.
computer, no internet. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna deploy it. Um, yeah, it was a train wreck. So on WordPress, I was basically deploying their website. So I don't know how much of y'all know about WordPress, but if you change the folder structure uh, for your page and you use FTP, it could completely crash it because it's routing to something that doesn't exist. That's basically what happened. But I didn't notice it because I was working until like 3 in the morning, which probably shouldn't have been before a camping trip. That's never here nor there. I deployed the website and I did not know it, but Friday I was getting calls. Our website is down. Our website is down. We don't know why, but folks are going to certain product pages and nothing's coming up. Um, and they were trying to communicate with the hosting platform, but it wasn't going very far. So I didn't come back until Monday. And I realized, like, oh no, which for me it was a simple change, but can you imagine the client?
Yeah.
The client
Oh,
has
yeah.
no idea what's going on. And this is where like you having the skills to explain to someone non-technical, technical things, it's super important. Oh my gosh. So the website crashed. It was down for 3 days because I was gone Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I came back Monday. And for me, it was super easy. I just forgot one of the slashes in my route, and I just had to update that. But it's pretty nerve-wracking. And I think when you have some of those moments, you really have to work with the client to gain the trust back and really be over communicative once that happens. Or you can really use the tools ahead of time and keep track of what you're doing and make sure that you don't deploy things on Fridays. That's just really, don't do that. It's never worth it. So yeah, so I learned from that, and just being, like I said, being overly communicative kind of came from that. And I really try and do every other week or sometimes twice a week talking with my clients. This is what's going on. I let them know. They might not know what a deploy means, but they know what going live means, and your customers can see this. They know what that means. And so really communicating that and having a clear idea between you and the client what we're when it's going to be finished, so that they can expect, like, okay, is this going to affect our traffic? Is this going to change our marketing strategy? All those different things is very important.
So, last question. Last words of advice for anybody interested in getting into freelancing. You covered make sure you're organized, create it as a business. You dropped some tools for us to use. Never deploy on Fridays. What other words of wisdom would you like to extend to anybody thinking about entering freelancing?
If you're thinking about entering freelance, I say just do it. You have to take the leap. You're going to learn some new stuff. It's going to be awesome. And if anything, you're going to create a great community. You're going to meet folks who have different skills than you, and you're going to really work with some clients that you'll probably see in the future. You'll probably see, again, and if not, you'll work with some of those folks again. It's a very small community we have. So I would say just do it, and really just use that as a time to explore and really take a chance on yourself. But be honest and just communicate that with the folks you're working with.
I'm going to drop your LinkedIn into the chat so everybody knows how to communicate with you. Lexius, thank you so much for joining us today. For all of those who are listening, we usually have our guest speakers come in on Friday. Lexius was able to join us today on Wednesday. We do have a live event coming up on Friday, and hope to see you all there. That's going to be live stream. It's also going to be live in our Escondido office, so I hope you see everybody who can make it. Whoever lives in Southern California, would love to see you guys down there. And we will be seeing you guys next Friday, and we'll be interviewing another guest. Thank you so much, Lexius. Goodbye,
Awesome.
everybody. We'll see
Thank
you guys
you.
till next week.